Once again, we have our oral history microphone on a visit in Marshall County. We're visiting in the home of Mr. and Mrs. I.W. Barnett in Hardin. I.W., I guess you're known by a number of different names. We'll try to call you that, though. That's what you're listed in the phone book.
Yes.
Your name is really Ira Wilma.
Right.
And you were born...
out here on Johnson Creek, by the old Bishop Mill place.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was that, Mr. Barnett?
August 12th, 1908.
So you're at least 65 years old.
Yes.
Then.
Plus.
Right now, I suppose you wouldn't become too angry if I said that I was born on Jim Will Barnett's place? I think it was.
I'm not sure. I remember where your dad and mother lived when you died, but I'm not sure where they were living when you were born.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was either Jim Will Barnett's place or Lee Gay's. Now, we lived on both of them at one time or another in there.
That's where they were living when they married, on the Lee Gay place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm a little bit familiar with that area, and of course the Barnett Cemetery has the remains of my father and mother, both buried there, and of course my grandparents and my sister, and so on. So Barnett's a very familiar name to me over the years. Now, your father was whom?
Whit Barnett.
And who was your mother?
Ennis Clayton.
Uh-huh. So the Clayton and the Barnett family came together, and you're the result of that.
I'm part of it, yeah.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had one sister. Mm-hmm. She's 2 years younger than I am.
Is she still living?
Yes, she lives near Ocala, Florida.
Gone down to the warm weather country. Yeah.
Yeah, she thinks there's no place like Florida.
Maybe she has an orange tree.
I have an idea there's some near her.
Yeah. All right. Now, Mr. Barnett ran a store. He was sort of noted in that area. And,
yes.
Jim Will Barnett's store.
Yes.
I used to hear my mother laugh and say that when you were growing up there that Mr. Barnett would say, now, Wilma, I don't want you eating up all the crackers.
Candy. I slipped candy and I'd let a lot of it melt in my pocket, and it would have a mess.
Yeah.
Back then they had about all the candy they had, their nigger toes or stick candy.
Yeah, so I remember she said one morning there, Mr. Barnett was after you pretty tough, and so you said, now, Paul, can't I have just one more? And he said, all right, one more, and then he went on waiting on the customer, and you just kept filling up your pockets, apparently.
Probably so.
And she laughed for years about it. She said, Mr. Barnett says, Wilma, you're filling your britches full, sir.
I think that's right. I've heard, I don't remember it personally so much, but I know I did stuff like that, and I heard different people talk to me about it.
Right now, where did you go to school?
At the old Johnson Schoolhouse down north of where we lived.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of the teachers you might have had any of those years?
Oh, yes. Robbie Wolf and Cletus Martis, I guess he was the first one I went to, and Retha Clark.
Now, Retha Clark, did she marry Brownie Smith?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought I remembered that name.
Yeah.
I imagine she was a good teacher.
Yes, I think she was. Yeah.
Seems to me that I've heard my dad say that he attended school there.
Probably did. I don't know where, your granddaddy, he lived out here, or died out here about where Seymour and Manny lives, didn't he?
I'm not certain. You know, he died before my father married.
Yeah.
I can remember hearing Dad say that he died that in the winter they had a lot of bad weather. It was 1917.
Yeah, he's about the coldest part of the winter, I think, best I remember.
And I know that he was, in general, sort of in the Olive neighborhood. Of course, the Barnett Cemetery is kind of in the Olive neighborhood.
Yes, a lot of people in that area are buried there.
Mm-hmm. Do they still have that big dinner every first Sunday in August, I guess?
Well, the dinner part of it's about played out, but they still have their meeting and get together for fellowship and help contribute to the upkeep of the cemetery.
Mm-hmm. I know I was glad when we got together a permanent endowment fund for the cemetery. I don't know who all worked on that. I believe Les Myers asked me to contribute, which of course I did.
Yeah, there's Les, and I think Henson down there worked on it, different ones, and Grace Morris.
Is Mr. Barnett buried there?
Yes.
Well, I know Mr. and Mrs. Lee Gay are buried there, and I guess
Reedy and Bessie.
Reedy and Bessie, and many of the people that we knew when I was growing up in those years.
Yeah, most all of the old people that were living around there when we were young is buried there.
How far was Johnson School from the store?
About a mile and a half.
We talk about how terrible the old days were. We had no school buses, had to walk, but mostly the walks were not real long, were they?
No,
there was a school building about every 3 or 4 miles.
I don't think any child had to go any further than that, if that far. Most of them mile and a half to 2 miles between schools. There was another school at Olive at that time, and I believe
Well, Joppa,
yeah. I'm not sure if it one as far either or not.
I think there was one at Unity at one time, wasn't there? Where the Unity Presbyterian Church, wasn't there a school there once?
I'm not sure.
But anyway, there were a good many of them. Well, how did you amuse yourself back then, besides eating candy and crackers and so on?
Well, David Johnson, one of the neighbor boys there, and myself, they had a couple of young mules. And on Sundays, we'd get them young mules out there in them fields and make them jump gullies. And we...
Well, that is like the steeplechase for the rich, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And they had play parties. And
Did you like to go to those?
yes.
Now, you mentioned Seymour Nanny a moment ago. He was a fiddler, wasn't he?
Yes. Him and his dad, well, it's music run in that family.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, him and Connie made violins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever, you kind of had to make your own toys back then, many of them. Did you make any hickory bark whistles?
Yes, hickory bark whistle, and we had get rims off of wagon hubs and make a paddle and roll them. I bet I rolled one of them 1,000 miles.
Yeah, so have I.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that in a while, but we did that.
Oh, yes.
You put a little cross stick on it, and you got to where you could just handle that like a fellow would a basketball almost.
Oh, yes. If you get a hold of one of those round hub rings, they made mighty good ones. You control them better than you could the flat ones.
Yeah.
Oval.
Yeah. Well, that's real good. And of course, we played marbles and all sort of dropping handkerchief and wolf over the river.
And played jail. I remember one time we were living down there at the grocery, and a bunch of us boys was playing jail. John Barnett was a jailer, and I don't know, there's several boys around there, and Unley Gordon had him in jail there in the stable long about Christmas time. Where he was raising Cain in there, and John hollered at him to quiet down. He didn't do it, and he had a blank pistol. He stuck that blank pistol through the crack of the door and shot it. Just as he did, Unley stuck his face up to the crack, and he wore a powder in his face from the rest of his life, I guess, from that incident. It's a wonder he didn't get hurt bad.
Why, it could have blinded him.
Sure could. Just happened not to hit him in the eye, it hit him in the cheek more.
Well, people get thoughtless, don't they?
They
Meant
sure
no
do.
harm by it.
No, no. No, it wouldn't hurt him for anything. But
You know, you've mentioned something that I hadn't thought of, I guess, in 25 years, but at Christmas time, we used to shoot firecrackers.
yes.
I know in the North they thought that was the strangest thing. They always did it 4th of July.
Yeah.
But around here, and many people, and I never had a blank pistol. My mother never would let me have one. But nearly all the boys had a blank pistol. Those things, they made a terrible noise.
Oh, yes.
And
And they could be dangerous, too. They wasn't made to shoot bullets in, but they'd shoot. You could put a .22 shell in them.
Mhm.
And I have cut the bullet off with a .22 and shoot them in that. But it was a dangerous thing to do because them barrels are not bored straight through. There's a little board from both ends, and sometimes there's a pretty good ridge in there, and it could cause them to explode mighty easy.
If I remember right, when you fired that thing, a blaze ran out the end of it, an inch long or so.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know one Christmas we walked way over to Butler's store. Now, that is in Callaway when I was about 8 years old, I guess. And Irvin Jackson bought a pistol and a bunch of cartridges from this Butler store. We thought we had the greatest time that ever was.
Yeah.
That was Christmas 1931, I believe it was.
I had a little old black mare there. She's just as fat as a butterball and wasn't fit for anything but to ride. I used to get on her and shoot them blank pistols. She got where she didn't pay any attention to it. So,
Well, you know, you ate a lot of crackers and a lot of candy, but you never did get fat.
No.
You've never been the type to get a lot of weight. have you?
No, I've never had a weight problem in that respect.
Well, you grew up, you finished at Johnson School, and where did you first go to work? Do you work around on the farm, or?
No, the first work I done, I guess, I doubt if anybody in the country can say the same thing, but I worked on the Southern Railroad section in Centralia, Illinois when I was 13 years old.
Oh, you started awfully young,
I did.
didn't you?
Of course, I didn't last long. We was building a switch out of St. Louis, Centralia, and the old superintendent come down there and saw me down there, and he told the foreman, said, "Get that darn kid out of here before he kills himself or somebody else." Well, that wound up my section work.
He realized that you weren't old enough.
Oh, I was just a little stringy kid. I wasn't old enough for section work. Wasn't heavy enough.
Mhm. Now, back then, they didn't have all the machinery. You had to handle the ties,
Ties and everything.
and they would. You had to, I guess, help carry rail,
Just you had to do it all by hand practically.
and you drove those spikes with the hammers,
Yeah.
didn't you? Sledgehammers.
Yes.
Now I understand they have big machines that drive those things with compressed air, I suppose.
Yes, yeah, they got machines that they gauge the track and set it and nail it all in one operation, I think.
And they even put the lime rock between the rails.
Yes.
Shake it all down and tamp it. And back then, you had to do all that by hand.
Yeah. Oh, after I left there, then I come back here and went to Florida eventually in 1924. And after I got down there, I drove truck and I drove taxi and several different things. I stayed down there 2 years and a half the first time I went, and come back. Went to Michigan. I got a job up there with Bud Wheel. I was living over in East Dearborn and had to ride a streetcar over there, and I worked one day and I just didn't like Detroit at all. I said, well, I never have even been back after my pay for that one day's work. And I left.
That's drawing a lot of interest, but now.
It should, yeah. I come back, stayed around here a while, went back to Florida.
Well, now, when did you get married?
1927.
And,
No, 29.
and whom did you marry?
Avis Henderson.
Avis Henderson. Was she from Marshall County?
Oh, yes. She lived in the Joppa area there. Attended Joppa school in her grade school.
That wasn't terribly far from where you grew up.
No.
Who was her father?
Tim Henderson. Sawmill man.
Was Ray Henderson kin to...
They're cousins. Ray's daddy and I believe his granddaddy were brothers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Ray's great-granddaddy and her granddaddy were brothers.
Uh-huh. All right, so you got married, and then did you take her to Florida?
No, carried her back to Michigan. I went back to Michigan 1928, and finally got a job there at Ford Motor Company, and I got fired 2 or 3 times there. At that time, plant protection, if they didn't like the way you parted your hair or something, well, they just tell you to go to the employment office, you was fired. I was driving a tractor there at one time and hauling the machinery in at the plant there. At that time, they didn't have the forklifts and things that they do now. They had to pull the machinery on steel plates they called stone bolts with a tractor. We was unloading a bunch of machinery off a flat car out the side of the building there one day, and the crane had to leave and go down the cement plant to make a lift. There was nothing we could do but wait till he got back. And the first thing you know, here come head of plant protection around there, him and one of his henchmen, and they got out of the car and walked around everybody and asked them what they're supposed to be doing. Got to me and asked me the same thing. He looked me up and down. And, take your tractor to the garage, you're fired.
Well,
Well, I did. I went down to the employment office then. The old fellow worked in there, and a real nice old fellow. He said, well, Sonny, he said, you know the difference in a screwdriver and a monkey wrench? I said, yes, sir, I believe I do. He said, well, I'm going to put you in a tool room. So he put me in a tool room in the locomotive shop, which I enjoyed. Worked there, I guess, over a year, and in the meantime, I'd put my application in for the trade school. So they finally transferred that tool room under the supervision of a foreman over the 2 rooms in the foundry machine shop and some other places around there, and of course I would have been a new hand, and I'd had to take midnight shift and the dirtiest jobs there, because at that time they didn't have seniority in the unions like they've got now. So you had to take what they wanted. So I finally got busy and got transferred into the electrical department as an apprentice electrician and started electrical school.
now that is one of the best things you ever did.
That was.
That put you in a skilled
Yes.
group. Now, did you learn that at the Henry Ford Trade School?
Yes, I did. Most of I know about it.
How did one qualify for that? Did you just apply and?
Yeah, you had to put your application in, and you had taken a test. I knew enough about tools and piping. I'd worked some with plumbers and knew pipe sizes and things. But I never finished the 8th grade in school, and they gave me physical test of mathematics. When they extract the square root of a number, well, I just thought all the roots was round. I didn't know they had such thing as square roots. But I happened to know enough about mathematics that I made the entrance exam all right. Now, you talk about a poor country boy having to dig. I did, but I made my grades and never failed a course until we got.
Was the tuition high?
No, no tuition at all. We got laid off during the Depression there in 1931, and so I lost out. I tried to get back in there and start up where I left off when we got laid off in 31, when we went back to work in 35, but they wouldn't let me. I'd had to start it over as new, but I did get back in the electrical department and worked there as long as I stayed there.
Well, that was good in a way. You at least came away with an education, and
Couldn't have got one as good a one anywhere else. We had some real good instructors, and it was well worth.
I've heard they were among the best.
We were, I think. A lot of boys around here got some good trades there. A bunch of them, some of them, tool and die makers and different things.
Now, that was a rather good paying skilled job too, wasn't it?
Real good paying.
And now eventually you came back here for good when, about 35 or so?
44.
44.
Yeah. I came back, went into business for myself, worked myself contracting and run service shop in Murray for a couple of years.
Now your boys followed that trade too, did they, Bobby?
Yeah, they all three started out as electricians, and still Bob and Earl, the youngest one, still works at it. The oldest boy, he's in supervision now, management.
So you had 3 sons. Did you have any daughters?
No, just 3 boys.
Right. And did they have any children?
Yes. The oldest boy, Eugene, has 2 boys, and Bob has a boy and a girl, and then Earl has 2 boys and a girl. Three boys and a girl, yeah.
Do they all live close enough that you get to see them fairly regularly?
No, we don't have a grandchild lives in the state of Kentucky. They're scattered all the way from Florida to Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, lost all over the country.
You have a geography lesson just naming where they live.
Got one in Indiana.
Well, you wouldn't have any children beyond grandchildren, would you?
Got one great-grandchild.
A great-grandchild?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Barnett, you're a very fortunate individual in many ways.
We think so. We're proud of all of our grandchildren and children. They all have got good, responsible jobs, and we feel like they're doing good.
Now let's see. The boys, some of them played basketball here at Hardin, didn't they?
Yeah, they all 3 did. Yeah. Earl and Bob both played in the service. Gene was in the service, but he had taken rheumatic fever not too long after he went in there and almost died. And so he spent about 6 months or more in a hospital.
Now, you told us a little bit about some of the fun you had with mules and how you jumped gullies and so on. When did you get your first car?
Well, I learned to drive. Didn't get a car myself until I was I was in the late teens, I guess. But I learned to drive, and I was probably 10 or 12 years old. My granddad had an old Briscoe car.
A Briscoe.
Not many people ever heard of them, I don't guess. And I'd watched my Uncle Reed drive it quite a bit. He was living there then. I kept asking him to let me drive, but one day he had the car lived there across the road from the store, and I got after him about letting me drive. Well, get in and go on.
You hadn't had any lessons?
I hadn't had the lesson one. I did. I got in and drove it up toward Olive about a mile, turned around and went back. I've been driving ever since.
Yeah.
I drove it over here one time. Didn't have any brakes or clutch, either one on it. Your dad and Rocky Brown was with me.
Well, Dad probably was laughing and carrying on. He usually did.
Probably. We started back. I couldn't get it fixed over after I got over here. And we started back home and got out east of town here where Charlie Lee used to live. You're probably familiar with that. And there's a hump there, a pretty good hill, a short hill there, and I got to get up enough speed to get over that without having to shift gears because I didn't have a clutch. And just as I got to the top, I looked, and here comes Mr. Charlie up the other side in the wagon with a load of pole wood.
Oh.
They said I started pulling back on the steering wheel and hollering, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I got by, just one of the poles of wood kind of scraped the side of the car just a little bit, and I started to drive on. And Roger said, wait a minute, says, Kelly's out. He's out there on the side of the road, and he jumped out in the briar patch when we started to meet that wagon there. Stop and pick him up.
Yeah. Oh, that was... Did someone told me that Briscoe made a car one time that had a big headlight that turned with the steering wheel. That it...
Well, this one didn't, I don't think. They didn't make them long. They made a Earl after that. And then they played out, and I don't know. They may have made one with a headlight that turned, but I don't remember. But they didn't have a clutch on them like the cars do now. They just had a metal plate, went over the collar on the drive shaft, and you push your clutch in, and that plate would push a little gadget in there and disengage your drive shaft. It had a...
So it wasn't real smooth, was it?
Well, it was as long as it worked. They had a kind of a brake lining facing on that metal plate that went around there, but it would wear out, and then your metal on the hilts did would get hot and go to bending, so you just didn't have any clutch.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we've used up nearly all of our time. We got about a minute and a half or so left. Do you remember any more funny stories you can tell us about Dad jumping in the briar patch?
No, not offhand. There's a lot of them. I've run into a lot of different...
Did you ever drive a Model T? It had a peculiar transmission.
You name it, I just about drove it. I drove a Model T, and back then the old Buicks, they had a shift of their own, and so did Dodge.
Dodge was just backwards, wasn't it?
Dodge, low is where reverse is on a standard, and high is where second is. Mm-hmm. And the Buick is high, low is where high is on a standard, and high is where low is on a standard.
Boy, fellas really get mixed up easily then, couldn't you?
The old white trucks, they had a sliding gear shift. They had about 6 or 8 different speeds on them. They were a good truck on the road, but they wasn't worth a hoot and sand. That's where we drove them down in Florida, and then sand roads there for driving for Coca-Cola Company, delivering water. And well, no, that's oil. Drove a white. They had delivered oil for Standard Oil down there, and he drove an old white.
Well, Mr. Barnett, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for inviting me into your home, and
well, I enjoyed it, and
I wish you many more years with your wife and grandchildren and children and great-grandchild.
Well, we've had 56 years together, and that's
56 years.
Yes, sure
That's
have.
way over the.
Over the average. I never
Yeah.
expected. Well, I never expected to live as long as we have.
And you were married June 2nd.
1929.
Everything looked rosy then, but before the year was over, the bottom fell out. And
That's right. Our oldest boy was born in May of the next year, and I got laid off about the time he got off. She spent, I was 16 days in the hospital there at the time, and like to lost both of them. And at that time, her hospital bill was $195, and that included some special nursing. 192 and a half, she said.
Yeah.
And that
Well-
included some nursing fee and all.
we certainly thank you. It's been a real pleasure. This is Ray Mofield with the Oral History Mike, and we return you now to the studio in Benton.